It was a bright and sunny afternoon, the perfect setting for a birthday party. The house was buzzing with excitement as friends and family gathered to celebrate my 7-year-old daughter's special day. The sound of laughter and cheerful chatter filled the air as children ran around, playing games and chasing each other. My daughter, Sophie, was glowing with happiness in her adorable birthday dress, her long hair tied up in a neat braid, and a smile on her face that could light up the entire room. The atmosphere was warm and lively, with colorful balloons swaying gently in the breeze near the windows, and the table laden with delicious snacks, party hats, and, of course, the star of the day, the cake. The cake was nothing short of a masterpiece, decorated with intricate designs and topped with strawberries and whipped cream. It was the kind of cake you'd see in a fairy tale, with its layers perfectly stacked and the icing glistening in the light. Sophie's eyes sparkled with excitement as she gazed at the cake, eagerly awaiting the moment when she would make a wish and blow out the candles. As the clock struck the hour for the cake-cutting ceremony, everyone gathered around the table, singing the familiar birthday song. Sophie's face lit up with joy, her eyes wide as she tried to take in the moment. She felt like the luckiest girl in the world, surrounded by the people who loved her, her favorite treats, and a cake that seemed almost too beautiful to eat. But little did Sophie know, her Aunt Rebecca had other plans. Rebecca, my younger sister, had always been known for her sense of humor and playful pranks. She had a mischievous glint in her eye, and as she stood at the back of the room, I could see her preparing for something I wasn't quite sure of at the time. As we finished singing, I turned my attention back to Sophie, who was about to make her wish. But before she could even blow out the candles, Rebecca, with a wide grin on her face, took a step forward, picked up the cake, and without any warning, smashed it right into Sophie's face. "Happy birthday!" "Surprise!" Rebecca shouted, her voice filled with laughter. For a split second, everything went silent. Sophie stood there, frozen in place, her face now covered in a thick layer of cake and frosting. The room was still, the sound of Rebecca's voice echoing in the sudden hush. The cake that had once looked so perfect was now splattered all over my daughter's face, and I could see the shock and surprise written all over Sophie's expression. I watched as my mother, who had been standing nearby, burst into laughter, her voice loud and carefree. "That was hilarious," she exclaimed, wiping away a tear from her eye from laughing so hard. The other guests, unsure of what to make of the situation, followed suit, some chuckling while others just stared at Sophie, unsure how she would react. But Sophie, she stood still, not a single tear, not a cry, just complete silence. My heart raced. I had hoped the prank would be funny, but seeing my daughter standing there with cake smeared all over her face made me uneasy. I wasn't sure if she was upset, but I could see that her face wasn't showing the kind of shock or anger I had expected. Instead, there was something else, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Sophie slowly wiped a little frosting off her cheek, still standing perfectly still, her expression unreadable. Her eyes darted from one person to another as the room filled with laughter, unsure if the prank was funny or if it had gone too far. Everyone waited in anticipation for her response. Would she cry? Would she throw a tantrum? Or was she going to laugh it off and roll with it? To my surprise, Sophie didn't break down. Instead, she took a deep breath and then turned her gaze toward me. I could see the wheels turning in her head, and that's when she spoke up, her voice calm and composed despite the mess on her face. "Mom, can I show them the present now?" she asked, her tone steady and thoughtful, as if the cake fiasco hadn't fazed her one bit. The room fell silent again, the laughter fading as everyone processed what Sophie had just said. What was she talking about? Was she still holding on to a present? I wasn't sure what was happening, but the mood had shifted from playful to something a little more intense. As I stood there, unsure of what to do next, I realized that Sophie had completely stunned everyone in the room. Her calmness in the face of the prank made me proud. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was about to unfold. This was no ordinary birthday prank. Something told me that Sophie was about to surprise us all in a way we'd never expect. Her smile, though slightly smeared with cake, never faltered. And as I looked around the room, I noticed that everyone's expressions had shifted from laughter to curiosity. They were now waiting for Sophie's next move, eager to find out what she had planned. The tension in the room was thick as the seconds ticked by. Everyone was waiting for Sophie to make the next move, wondering what kind of surprise she had in store. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of something much more unexpected. Sophie stood there, completely covered in frosting and cake, her face still a picture of calm. The entire room had fallen into an eerie silence. Everyone had expected the typical reaction from a young child when faced with a prank like this. Tears, tantrums, or perhaps even an angry outburst. But Sophie did something none of us could have predicted. She did nothing at all. She simply stood there, her wide blue eyes staring blankly at the people around her. Her calmness in the face of such a messy surprise left everyone in the room unsure of how to react. As I watched her, I could feel a strange mixture of concern and admiration. I had prepared myself for a meltdown, but Sophie's response was almost too composed, too still. The guests who had once been laughing nervously now shifted uncomfortably, unsure of whether they should continue laughing or step in and console her. Rebecca, still holding the remnants of the cake in her hands, looked just as stunned as everyone else. She had expected Sophie to cry, to throw a fit, or at least show some emotion. But there was nothing, just the peaceful stillness of a girl who seemed unaffected by the chaos around her. "Sophie, honey, are you okay?" I asked, my voice soft and filled with concern. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked around the room, her gaze lingering on the laughing faces of the family members who had once been so cheerful. There was something different in her eyes, something that made me wonder what was going on in her young mind. Then, after what felt like an eternity, Sophie slowly wiped a little frosting from her cheek, her movements deliberate and measured. She looked at me and gave me a small, almost imperceptible smile. There was no anger, no frustration, just a quiet calm that seemed out of place in such a lively environment. "Mom," she said softly, still gazing at me, "can I show them the present now?" Her question hung in the air, and I was taken aback by her poise. I had expected some kind of emotional outburst, but what I got instead was a calm request that felt almost surreal. It was as if the prank had completely missed its mark, and Sophie was unaffected by it, her focus now on something else entirely. The room grew quiet as everyone waited for me to respond. I could sense the confusion in the air. My mother, who had been laughing moments ago, now stood frozen, her eyes wide as she tried to process what Sophie had just said. My sister Rebecca, still holding the cake in her hands, looked as if she were about to apologize, but Sophie's unbothered demeanor seemed to stop her in her tracks. "Sophie," I said, my voice still gentle but now laced with curiosity, "what present are you talking about? What do you mean?" Sophie turned to me, her expression still calm, and in a voice that was both matter-of-fact and reassuring, she said, "The one I've been hiding. The one I made for Aunt Rebecca." I froze, processing her words. My daughter, covered in cake, had a present for Rebecca. I hadn't even known that Sophie had prepared anything, let alone something so significant. Was this part of the prank? Or was there something deeper to this moment? A hush fell over the crowd as Sophie slowly walked over to the table, her feet making soft pattering sounds on the floor. The room watched as she retrieved a small, carefully wrapped box from under the table. The box was nothing like the colorful, shiny wrapping paper most people would expect at a birthday party. Instead, it was wrapped in simple brown paper, tied together with a thin piece of twine. Sophie cradled it gently in her hands as she walked back toward Rebecca, who was now standing with a look of uncertainty. "Here you go, Aunt Rebecca," Sophie said, holding the box out toward her. "I made it for you." Rebecca's eyes widened, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for the box. The entire room was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. What could be inside this simple, unassuming package? What was Sophie's real intention behind this gift, especially after the cake incident? Rebecca, now silent, carefully unwrapped the brown paper. Inside, there was a small wooden frame, intricately carved with beautiful patterns. At first glance, it seemed like a simple craft project, but as Rebecca held it up to the light, she realized that it wasn't just any frame. Inside the frame was a drawing of Sophie, Rebecca, and me, all together, smiling in front of a house, with a heart drawn around us. The room was still, the laughter completely gone. Everyone stared at the frame, at the care and love Sophie had poured into this simple gift. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears as she took in the drawing, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Sophie, this is beautiful." I watched as Rebecca held Sophie close, pulling her into a tight hug. Sophie's calm expression remained, though I could see a soft glow in her eyes as she hugged her aunt back. It was in this moment that I realized something. Sophie wasn't upset by the cake prank because she had already known how to turn a situation into something positive. She had made a gift for Rebecca, showing her love in a way no prank could diminish. The laughter that had once filled the room came back, but this time it was filled with warmth, tenderness, and admiration. The prank, in the end, didn't matter. What mattered was the thoughtfulness of Sophie's unexpected reaction and the love she had for her family, something that no cake in the face could ever take away. As the room erupted into applause and congratulations for Sophie's beautiful gesture, I stood there in awe of my daughter. She had truly surprised us all in the most unexpected and heartwarming way. The moment Sophie handed the small wooden frame to Aunt Rebecca, the entire room seemed to shift. What had started as a playful prank, a cake smashed into Sophie's face, was now turning into something much deeper, something none of us could have expected. The room, still filled with laughter and warmth, was now enveloped in a different kind of tension, curiosity, awe, and a touch of uncertainty. What was this gift that Sophie had made for Rebecca, and why did it seem so important? As Rebecca carefully held the framed drawing, her eyes glistening with tears, she turned to Sophie, her voice shaky with emotion. "Sophie, this is amazing. I don't know what to say. It's perfect." Sophie simply smiled, a small but confident smile that spoke volumes. She wasn't the kind of child to seek attention or validation. In fact, she had always been reserved, more focused on her own quiet world of creativity and thoughtfulness. To see her so calm, even after the prank that had just happened, left me in awe. It was clear that Sophie had a maturity beyond her years, a kind of wisdom that often went unnoticed in children her age. The room, still in awe, slowly began to fill with murmurs of admiration. "She's so calm," someone whispered, "and so thoughtful. What a surprise." But just as the conversation began to return to the cake-smashing incident, Sophie did something that took everyone completely by surprise. She stood up, her voice ringing clear and steady as she addressed the group. "There's more," she said, her words cutting through the chatter and refocusing everyone's attention. The room fell silent once again. I looked at Sophie, unsure of what she meant. She had already given Rebecca the beautifully thoughtful gift, one that would have been more than enough for any occasion. What more could there possibly be? Sophie walked back to the table, where the cake had once sat, and picked up a small decorated box. It was simple, much smaller than the cake box, and yet there was something undeniably special about it. The way she held it, the way she approached the table with such quiet determination, sent a ripple of anticipation through the room. Everyone watched, their eyes following her every move. Sophie carefully walked back to where Rebecca stood, her face now bathed in a gentle, soft light from the nearby windows. She held the box in her hands, her grip firm but gentle. It seemed as though she had been waiting for this moment, the right time to reveal the next part of her surprise. "Open it," Sophie urged softly, looking at her aunt with a mixture of excitement and pride. Rebecca took the box from Sophie's hands, her heart racing with curiosity. She gently untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside was a beautifully handcrafted bracelet, with intricate patterns carved into the silver and tiny charms that shimmered under the light. The bracelet was delicate, but clearly made with great care. Each charm was symbolic, each one representing a moment or memory they had shared over the years. Rebecca gasped, her eyes filling with even more tears. "Sophie, this is incredible. You made this." Sophie nodded, her smile growing. "I did. I thought it would be the perfect thing to go with the drawing." It was a simple piece of jewelry, but in that moment, it was so much more. The charm bracelet was not just a gift. It was a symbol of everything Sophie had been quietly building. Her love, her appreciation, and her deep understanding of her family. It was a reminder of the bond they shared, something that couldn't be captured in any prank or simple birthday party moment. Rebecca, her hands trembling, gently clasped the bracelet around her wrist, her eyes never leaving Sophie. "You have no idea how much this means to me," she whispered. "I'm so proud of you, Sophie." For the first time that afternoon, the entire room was quiet, completely still. No one moved, no one spoke. Everyone was completely absorbed in the moment, in the realization that Sophie, despite the chaos of the cake prank, had managed to turn it into something profoundly beautiful. The room had shifted from light-hearted laughter to something deeper, a moment of reflection, of appreciation for Sophie's thoughtfulness, and the care she had put into her gifts. Everyone who had been part of the party that day had witnessed something remarkable. They had seen a child show more maturity and emotional intelligence than most adults could hope for. Rebecca slowly pulled Sophie into a hug, holding her close as she whispered, "Thank you, Sophie. This is the best birthday surprise I could ever ask for." Sophie hugged her aunt back, her arms wrapping around Rebecca's waist with a quiet sincerity. The room filled with soft smiles, and for the first time, there was no talk of cake or pranks. The focus had shifted entirely to the love and connection between Sophie and Rebecca. The prank had been forgotten, replaced by something far more significant, a gesture of love that no one had expected, but that had touched everyone deeply. And then, as if on cue, the laughter returned. This time, it was a laughter of joy and warmth. The guests clapped their hands, some wiping away tears, while others stood still, taking in the beauty of the moment. Sophie, still covered in cake, beamed with pride. She had turned a simple birthday prank into a meaningful surprise that no one would ever forget. As the party continued, the memory of Sophie's surprising reaction lingered. What had started as a simple cake prank had morphed into a moment of reflection, connection, and love. The unexpected surprise was not just in Sophie's gifts, but in the way she had handled the situation with grace and maturity that no one had anticipated. The party would forever be remembered as the day Sophie taught everyone the true meaning of thoughtful surprises. As the moments passed, the room filled with an energy that was both uplifting and sincere. What had begun as a playful prank, Sophie's Aunt Rebecca smashing a cake into her face, had transformed into something far more meaningful. The laughter that followed Sophie's gift to Rebecca wasn't just the result of a funny situation, but a reflection of the deep bond and love shared among family members. The prank, though unexpected, had been a vehicle for Sophie's quiet wisdom, and it was clear now that it had served a greater purpose. The cake incident, once a focal point of the party, was now a distant memory. No one spoke of the messy frosting or the moment of shock that had frozen Sophie's face. Instead, the focus had shifted to the heartwarming surprises Sophie had revealed with her thoughtful gestures. The carefully crafted frame with the drawing and the delicate charm bracelet had captured everyone's attention and admiration. And it was this warmth that filled the room as the final moments of the party unfolded. Sophie, still covered in cake, now looked completely at ease. She had a serene expression on her face, as though she had known all along that her actions would speak louder than any prank could. She had shown us all a side of her that we hadn't fully appreciated before, her deep understanding of love, of family, and the power of thoughtful gestures. Rebecca, with her arms still wrapped around Sophie, looked at her with a mixture of pride and gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you enough, Sophie," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've completely blown me away today. I didn't expect any of this, but now, I can't imagine this day without your gifts." Sophie smiled softly, her eyes meeting Rebecca's. "It's okay, Aunt Rebecca. I wanted to give you something special, something you'd remember. I'm glad you liked it." The sincerity in Sophie's voice was undeniable. It wasn't about the gifts or the material things. It was about the thought and care that went into them. Sophie had put her heart into every detail, and it was clear to everyone in the room that her actions were motivated by a love that went beyond what words could express. Meanwhile, my own heart swelled with pride as I watched my daughter. I had always known that she was kind and thoughtful, but seeing her handle this situation with such grace and maturity left me in awe. The way she had responded to the prank was nothing short of extraordinary. Instead of letting it affect her negatively, Sophie had turned it into an opportunity to show her family how much she cared. I stepped forward, approaching Sophie as she stood there, looking at her aunt with a shy smile. I knelt down to her level and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're incredible, Sophie," I said, my voice soft, but filled with admiration. "You handled everything with such grace, and I'm so proud of you." Sophie looked at me, her eyes bright and sincere. "Thanks, Mom. I just wanted to make everyone happy," she said quietly. Her words spoke volumes, and in that moment I realized that Sophie had not only learned the value of giving, but she had also learned how to transform a negative experience into something positive. It was a lesson that many adults still struggle to grasp, yet here she was, showing us all how to turn life's little surprises into moments of joy and connection. As the party continued, the focus shifted from the initial chaos of the prank to the genuine connections being made. Family members gathered around, chatting, laughing, and sharing stories. The joy was no longer about the cake or the party favors. It was about being present in the moment, celebrating the love that tied them all together. The sense of warmth and togetherness was palpable, and it was all thanks to Sophie's heartwarming surprises. Later, as the guests began to leave, Rebecca pulled Sophie into another hug. "Thank you again, sweetheart," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I'll always remember this birthday, thanks to you." Sophie smiled, her face glowing with happiness. "You're welcome, Aunt Rebecca. I'm glad you liked it." As the last of the guests departed, I took a moment to reflect on the day. The cake incident had, in many ways, been a blessing in disguise. It had brought everyone closer together, and it had allowed Sophie to shine in a way I hadn't anticipated. She had taken a situation that could have been awkward or uncomfortable and had turned it into something beautiful, something that everyone would remember for years to come. Sophie's birthday had gone from being a simple celebration to an unforgettable day of surprises and heartwarming moments. And as I looked at my daughter, I realized that this was just one of the many ways she would continue to surprise me and the people she loved. She had shown us that life wasn't about perfection. It was about love, understanding, and the small, thoughtful actions that made all the difference. As I tucked Sophie into bed that night, her face still a little smudged with frosting, I kissed her forehead and whispered, "I love you, sweetie. You made today so special." "I love you too, Mom," she replied, her voice sleepy but content. "Thanks for letting me surprise everyone." With that, she drifted off to sleep, her heart as full as mine. The prank was long forgotten, but the love and warmth that Sophie had shared with us all would stay with us forever. And so, the heartwarming resolution to the day's events unfolded. What had started as a messy joke turned into a beautiful reminder of the power of love, kindness, and family. A lesson that Sophie had taught us all without even realizing it. The story of Sophie's birthday would be one that we would look back on for years, remembering how a small act of thoughtfulness had brought us all closer together.